A very good evening, Zimbabwe. Welcome to Live Talk. We're coming to you live from Studio 7 at the Voice of America in Washington this Thursday, August the 24th, 2023. And I'm your host, Marvelous Mhlanganyahuye. And tonight on Live Talk, we're looking at voting in Zimbabwe, described as chaotic by many people in the country. The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission opened polls late yesterday at some polling stations in urban Harare and Bulawayo. Some polling stations had no ballots for several hours. But before we delve into our main topic, let's take a look at what is happening in the United States of America. Ours is a world of older adults living longer and doing more in their advanced years. Many politicians are staying in office well past typical retirement ages, with the United States facing two of the country's oldest frontrunners for president. VOA senior Washington correspondent Carol Presutti explores the ages of current world leaders.
At 90, Cameroon's Paul Biya is the world's oldest leader. This is him at last year's U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit, seemingly confused as an aide tells him the audience is awaiting his speech.
You mean I should speak now? Where?
You can do it sitting down.
Why?
Biya has served as president for 40 years after getting Parliament to extend his term of office and then to eliminate term limits. VOA spoke to Cameroonians and blurred their faces out of safety concerns.
I think that being led by such an old person, he's not aware of the problems that young people are suffering from.
Whether you're 30 or 50 years old, anyone can serve out their term and leave. But when you come and take power as if you were royalty, that's not good.
At 86, Pope Francis doesn't run a country, but he does rule the world's Catholics. Does age matter? From Costa Rica.
I make that exception because he is a religious leader. Maybe with political figures, I would feel uncomfortable.
From Ecuador.
I believe that years bring experience that people can use to serve others.
From Colombia.
Not so much a limit on the ruler, but also a limit on the age of the people who advise them.
Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, at 84, is the longest-serving leader in the Middle East, serving since 1989. Iranian Americans had this to say about the octogenarian.
In the regime of the Islamic Republic, the problem is not the age of the leader, but the system is the problem.
The world of the 21st century is the world of youth, and with the knowledge that exists today, they are the ones who should do the important things.
In 2024, the United States could elect its oldest president ever. On Election Day, President Joe Biden will be 81. And Donald Trump, the frontrunner for the Republican nomination, will be 78. Both have shown signs of aging. The current president now uses a shorter set of retractable stairs for Air Force One. He also often uses note cards to avoid verbal gaffes.
Everyone feels welcome.
Generation Z includes the country's youngest voters, interviewed on the campus of the University of North Carolina.
When you start getting older, there's a lot of health risks, and you don't want a world leader to just all of a sudden just go down, like heart attack.
It depends on how open-minded a person is.
A study published by Oxford University Press says that older leaders who are, quote, senile can reinforce negative stereotypes about aging. But older leaders can also surprise people by showing they are mentally and physically fit for office. Carolyn Presutti, VOA News.
And now back to our main topic. Voting continued today in some polling stations that opened late due to the non-availability of ballot papers. Addressing journalists today, the Citizens Coalition for Change news spokesperson Promise Mukwananzi castigated the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission for running a flawed election.
So far, the information we have is that we are leading on the presidential election comfortably, and we are doing well on the parliamentary elections. We expect this trend to continue because the people of Zimbabwe have decided that they want change. The ballot papers we still did not know who printed them, where they were printed, and how many were printed. ZEC had announced that they printed 7.1 million ballot papers for the presidential election and 6.6 million for the parliamentary and local government election. Now, the question that begs answers is, how did we have the level of shortage that we witnessed? Then in terms of the election results, I think what we can say for now is that we are monitoring the situation. We have learned a lot from the past, and we will be responding accordingly at the appropriate time. But what we want to assure the people of Zimbabwe is that we are not going to let ZANU-PF get away with theft again.
That there was Citizens Coalition for Change spokesperson Promise Mukwananzi at a press conference in Harare today. Let's now hear from some voters expressing their frustration at the lack of ballots in some areas until late into the 2023 Zimbabwean election.
Ballot papers are supposed to be at polling stations 48 hours before the election starts. And come the election day, there is no ballot papers. We have to wait here for 12 hours and there are no ballot papers.
They said they didn't have ballot papers, so we voted around 4:30. That's when the ballot papers came. So I just voted now. We have patience because we need our votes.
Mapepa akansela asati asvika tikagara tikamirira tikatenderera nemazino tichingorwadziwa tiri pano nokuti vhoti ndo yakatikoshera saka tazotanga kuvhota kuma4.
I am of the opinion that the country is moving in the wrong direction in almost all the aspects, and that's what I'm voting against. Yes, so I'm very determined to see a change in the way that we are running. Even as evidenced by this, that this time people are still waiting in voting queues. That on its own, it tells you that things are not going on well. And these are things that we really need to see a change in this country.
The queue is still very long, and we don't know when our other friends are going to leave this place. Some have even gone home to get blankets to come and keep themselves warm like I have done, because I also want to cast my vote. But someone who was behind me is being told the paper is finished.
Those were some voters expressing their views about the just-ended polls. Meanwhile, 41 workers of the Zimbabwe Election Support Network and the Election Resource Center who were arrested for allegedly tabulating the election results were today seen by lawyers from the Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights. The workers are being charged of contravening Section 66 of the Electoral Act. Please stay tuned as we take a brief break. We'll be right back.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes, and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.
For those that have just joined us, please note that we are streaming live on all our Facebook pages, VOA Shona, VOA Studio 7, and VOA Ndebele. We're also live on YouTube at VOA Zimbabwe. And to discuss the chaotic 2023 polls, we are joined by Dr. Chipo Dendere and Dr. Ricky Mukonza. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Marvelous. Good evening to your viewers.
Good evening. I'll start off with you, Dr. Dendere. Are you surprised by ZEC in these general elections, what we're seeing happening on the ground?
First of all, Makadi Kumuri, Zimbabwe. How are you Zimbabweans doing? I hope you're following the election coverage. To your question, Marvelous, I think surprised in the sense that even at its worst, ZEC has never been this chaotic. We were discussing with other scholars earlier regarding the 2008 election, which is perhaps the most controversial election in Zimbabwean history. And even then, the voting process itself, the ability to get your ballot, functioned very well. What happened yesterday is shameful, it's shambolic, it's disorganized, and it's also very cruel. The fact that most people in urban areas did not get their ballot until after 10 p.m. during winter when it's very cold. People have children at home. Some people have disabilities. But Zimbabweans stayed in line from 7 a.m. until midnight. Some people had to go back at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. this morning to go and cast their vote. That level of incompetence is new, and I expected better. I expected them to be problematic, but I didn't expect them to fail at the basic responsibility of delivering ballots, especially because Justice Chigumba told us a few weeks ago that the reason why they could not remove Senator Monzera from the ballot was because they had already printed those ballots. And so why is it then that in urban areas, almost 70% of urban areas did not have their ballots for the local election. They did not have their ballot for parliament. They did not have the presidential ballot. And when they did receive the ballot, in some places, the logos were mixed up. Chamisa's face was unrecognizable on the ballot. It was completely unrecognizable. And so the small and big errors yesterday were completely shocking, especially for an organization that has had 5 years to work towards the election.
Thank you. They're moving over to you, Professor Mukonza. What should ZEC have done to avoid the problems it is facing?
Thank you very much, Marvelous. And I think ZEC, you see, I don't want to think that what's happening is a mistake or it's something that ZEC didn't want to happen. I believe that this is a deliberate ploy by ZEC and obviously its handlers to ensure that urban voters, because Marvelous and viewers, if you want to really understand what I'm saying, why would this problem be mainly in urban areas? And who is in the urban areas? And who are they known to support? So if you are able to answer those questions, you then understand what I'm saying, that this was not by mere chance or this was an accident. It was a deliberate ploy by ZEC and its handlers to frustrate urban voters. But we have seen that the ploy may have worked in some instances, but I think many voters showed resilience. They stayed until they managed to exercise their right to vote. So I don't think it's a mistake. I don't think it's something that ZEC would have wanted to avoid. It's something that they deliberately planned, and it's unfortunate that an organization of that importance, of that national importance, does its business in the manner that we have seen.
Thank you. They're moving over to you, Dr. Dendere. We heard ZEC saying that its plans were affected by many cases before the courts. It was arguing that this is what led to what we saw happening yesterday. Do you agree with that? Dr. Dendere?
Not at all. The argument that the delay in courts, because what would have happened is that ZEC should have delivered the ballots at every polling station 48 hours before. So if Zach was genuine, 52 hours before the election, they would have cross-checked that every single polling station had a ballot. But what Zach did was to refuse the opposition access to the printed ballot. They refused the opposition access to information on where the ballots were being printed, right? So as the previous speaker already said, there was something deliberate about what they were doing. If they were also following the letter of the law, a lot of these mistakes would have avoided. Because 52 hours before, they would have said, we don't have enough ballots in area X. So, I mean, it's just, it's them breaking the law, right? Why tell people to show up at 7 a.m. when they knew very well that in Harare, there were only 23% of polling stations that had received the full package of ballots. And even that 23%, when we showed up to vote in the morning. We could not find our names because the way that they had published the names was very confusing. So a lot of people were almost leaving because they were disappointed. They couldn't find their names. It was taking 30 minutes to an hour just to look for your name. It was pure disorganization that had nothing to do with the courts.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean when you say when you're looking for the names, you couldn't? It wasn't clear. What exactly? Take us through what happened.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you arrive at the polling station. This is in Harare West. They had stapled. Let me tell you what happened in 2018 so that the listeners can understand the difference. In 2018, at our polling station, we were divided, right? So last name starting A to D, you were told you're in tent A. Last name starting E to whatever, you are in this tent. This time around, what they did was to distribute the A's equally across all tents. We had about 6 tents. Distribute the B's equally across all tents, but without any particular order. So you didn't know if your last name is Dendere like mine, you had no idea, am I tent A, tent B, tent C? And they kept telling people to use the Equinet, not Equinet, but to check with *265# on your phone. But you couldn't do that because the networks were down. So every person had to literally walk to 6 tents and see, is my name Dendere here? And you, Dendere Chipo, might find your name on one tent, but Dendere Pamela or Dendere Winnie, my sisters, right, would not be able to find themselves in the same tent. So now my 2 sisters who live at the same address.
Dr. Dendere, let me just hold you there. I'll come back to you to take us in further. We have a caller. Caller Makadi yenyu. Taura yenyu, tukutaura nani muri kupi?
Muri kutaura na Gift, ndiri kuBotswana.
Taura itinzwi.
Nangu semaonero angu ndiri kuona senge ma-elections aya asina kuita zvakanaka.
Sei muri kudaro?
Chekutanga ndinoti inini chakaitika ndechekuti ma-elections avakamaziva kare kuti anofanira kuitika ivo vezeki. Ivo vachibva vataurira vanhu kuti vakazvigadzirira kuti ma-elections aitike. Asi chakashamisa ndechekuti ma-ballot papers ari kunzi akazoshayikwa. Izvi semaonero angu ndoona sekunge aive maune chete ekuti vanhu varamwe vasavhota.
Saka munofunga kuti poitwa sei manje?
Ma-elections adai vatombomira havo nezvavo nokuti ma-results achona handioni achibudisa pfungwa dzevanhu chaidzo. Pazoitawo ma-elections ne-independent electoral commission kwete iyi yezita.
Aiwa, tinotenda chaizvo caller. Coming back to you, Dr. Dendere, if you can just wrap up on what you were telling us about how people were finding their names.
Yeah, so if the people with the same last name who live at the same address were not in the same tent, right, it meant that you might find the first person in tent A, but the other person with the same last name living at the same address would be in tent F. But in order to find them, you had to look through all the tents, and there are, maybe 1,000 people. And so you're going through 1,000 names to find your name. And the names were stapled together. And you know, Zimbabwe is very strict with the laws. Everything is stapled together. So 100 people are waiting for access to the same sheet of paper so that you can go through it and find your name.
Thank you so much.
So it's small things like that that are just really unnecessarily chaotic.
Thank you so much. Toya kwamuri vamukonza muzvinafundo manzwa zvanga zviri kutaurwa naKola ari kuti iye ari kufunga kuti zvanga zviri kuitika izvi zvinhu zvazvakatorongwa. Munofunga sei?
Ndinotenderana nemunhu aridza runhare nenyaya yekuti ZEC isangano guru nditarisire kuti haina zvikwanisiro zvekuti inge ichiita basa rayo nekuti isangano rakakoshera nyika. Maelections akasafamba zvakanaka zvine zvazvinokanganisa mukutongwa kwenyika. Saka vatiti vakakanganiswa nenyaya dzevakaisa nyaya mumatare votiti chino nechino changa chisina kumira zvakanaka. Ndinongoona sekuti ndo madzanambwanana vechidiki vanobva vati kunyepera kuzungaira, asi vaine urongwa hwavo hwekukanganisa vavhoti vemuHarare nema urban areas akawanda. Ndo kwataona kwatanyanya kunzwa kuti panyaya yekusvika kwemaballot papers. Saka inini handisi kutambira nyaya yekuti ZEC yakakanganiswa nechimwe chinhu. ZEC ine urongwa hwayo hwayanga ichitoziva uye hwairi kutoita nenzira dzavanga vachida, unosanganisira kunonotsa kuunza maballot papers kunzvimbo dzinofanira kuvhotera.
Aiwa, tinotenda muzvinafundo Dendere. Manzwa zvataurwa naKola pamusoro pemabasa anga ari kubatwa neZEC. Imi munoti chii, zvoitwa sei tichiona kuti takamirira pari zvino kuti vanhu vagonzwa zvichabuda musarudzo?
I don't agree that elections should be abolished. I think elections are important. I think ZEC's incompetence means that ZEC needs to be revamped. So it's not that you get rid of elections. Even in autocratic regimes, even in regimes where democracy struggles, you still need elections. What we saw yesterday was the will of Zimbabweans to show up and make their voice heard. And so that level of participation is important, especially for the young people. Ama 2000, they showed up in their numbers and they protected the vote. I understand that today, for example, in Mount Pleasant, where Fadzai Mahere is running for office, they had a very difficult time getting their V11s from ZEC. And it was young people that were serving as a polling agent who waited and demanded that. So citizens need that outlet, because when you take away that outlet, it also creates room for violence. It creates room for more abuse by the state. So, but I do understand the sentiment that the caller is having, that, look, we are failing at this basic thing. But I don't think it's that elections don't work. It's just that ZEC is incompetent. And even more so, you know, it's not something I ever thought I would say to myself, but I interviewed Rita Makarawi and her team in 2010 and in 2013. And even though they too were under ZANU-PF, there was a level of professionalism in that ZEC office, especially from the lower people that were working with them. And I think what has happened at ZEC, much like the rest of the country, is that they have replaced professional people, right? People that are committed to their work with people that have no idea what they're doing, and people that are just there because they're cronies or somebody likes them, and they have no respect for the people of Zimbabwe.
Thank you so much. Over to a caller. Caller Makadi Yenyu. Hello. Aiwa, tiri wadi tukutaura nani uye zvemuri kupi?
Okay, muri kutaura naAni Tsundri kuBotswana.
Taurai tinzwe panyaya yema-elections.
Inini hangu panza nendineta ndepekuti vanhu vari kuvhota uye ZEC yanga yakataura iyo kuti yagadzirwa ma-elections, asi problem yayepo ndeyekuti debei rekuvhota kwakunzi mapepa haasi kuwanikwa, ari kushota. zvinova zvinhu zvinotishungurudza zvinotinetsa uye segeneration yechidiki tiri kuwanikwa nekunonetseka nekutambura even kuti tinge tichishanda munyika medu chaimo zvinhu zvinotibata nekutishungurudza nenyaya yekuti mabasa acho hakuna uye vacho vatinenge takasarudzwa kuti vavatungamiri vedu vanozouya maybe after wiki vave kuziva kuti takuenda kune dzimwe sarudzo after 5 years saka zvinhu zvinotishungurudza nekuti bata izvozvo zvasvaita kuti aiwa at least tikambochinjawo menyu pane zvatanga tinazvo timboona kuti zvinhu zvinodii. I think that is the best plan pane zvatiri kusangana nazvo machallenges atiri kusangana nawo.
Thank you. The caller vari kuBotswana muve nezuva rakanaka.
Ndinotenda tete.
Vamukonza taona iro sangano reZEC richizivisa vanhu kuti vanhu vambotsitsa hana vachiti ivo vanosungirwa kuti vataure kuti vakakunda musarudzo idzi. Takanyanyotarisa vematongerwo enyika kuti president mutungamiri wenyika vane mazuva 5 kuti vataure izvi. Munoona sei izvi?
Hongu izvo zvinogona kuita ndizvo hazvo, asi chatakadzidza kubva kumashure uku ndechekuti pamazuva iwayo avanenge vakapuwa akati wandeya pane zvakawanda zvinoitika zvakaita sekutamba nemafigures kuita kuwedzeredza manumbers kune vamwe vachidzikisira kune vamwe zvinozogumisira zvakonzeresa kuti zvanga zvichifanira kubuda musarudzo chaizvo zvisabude zviri izvo. Saka zvinenge zvakangonaka kungoti mavhotsi achiitika ngazvingobva zvabuda pachena kuvanhu vese kuti awana mavhotsi akati ndinhingi awana mavhotsi akati ndini. Izvezvi vanhu vadzimarvelous tinoziva kuti kune zvechimanje manje yatingati technology inogona kuita kuti vanhu vachingonovhota mavhotsi obva atozikanwa ipapo inonzi pachirungu e-voting. Ndinoshaya kuti Zimbabwe sei tisingagonowo kuita zvinhu zvakadaro zvinoita kuti kufungirana nekufungirwa kwekuti ma-elections anogona kunge ari kubiridzirwa kuite kushoma.
Thank you there, Muzvinafundo Mukonza. Coming back to you, Dr. Dendere, to just round us off. So what do you think people should be expecting as we await the 5 days that ZEC is mandated to tell the public who won, especially the presidential election?
I think the next 5 days are going to be critical for people to stay safe, be at home, don't get upset. In this process, we know that they always want to get urbanites riled up, get people's emotions high, or as we've seen what they've done to, sorry, I have a really bad cold, as they've done to civil society organizations, there will be targeted attacks on people. So I think Zimbabweans should keep their eyes. If you haven't taken pictures of the 11th, that is your right to do so, on polling stations to do so. It's mind-blowing that even though rural areas finished voting early, we still don't have the votes from the vote totals from rural areas. My concern, everyone's concern, is that they are probably cooking results right now. I don't want to pick on Uzumba Mramba Pungwa, but
thank you.
It's likely that that's what's happening.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, unlike football, we've got no more time. And that brings us to the end of our show. Signing off in Washington, D.C., I am Marvelous Mhlanga Nyahuye saying good night, Zimbabwe.